Thank you all for taking some time out of your busy day to join us here today. Here on Data Speaks with me is Phil Zeringue. Phil, do you want to take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Phil Zeringue. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Paradigm, and I'm the executive over our IT excellence and our PMO practice. I've been in the industry about 25 plus years, worked at multiple different Fortune 500, Fortune 1000s in lots of roles like IT director, CIO, and CFO. And so what I'm going to share with you today comes from my personal experience of having to figure out how to do this and getting it wrong before I got it right.
Excellent. Thanks, Phil. I'm always amazed by the extent of your experience. Hey, I'm Chris Gately. I'm your moderator as usual for Data Speaks. It's great to see you all again. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Paradigm. I've got 20 years in technology and consulting and the gray hairs to prove it. So again, thank you all for joining. To kind of kick it off, let me just touch base on, for those of you who don't know, who Paradigm is. Paradigm's been a leader for the last 25 years in management consulting. Here at Paradigm, we really have a maniacal focus on business value and what we call the power of Paradigm. And what that is really understanding our clients' vision for their business and where they're headed, right? Driving innovative solutions like you see here on the screen. But most importantly, it's identifying and communicating the value and the quantifiable impact that value drives that we deliver to them. Our experience in today's topic, application rationalization, spans decades. Whether it's helping a global airline through a merger and rationalizing their applications, or helping a super regional bank retire technical debt through rationalization. Our team has the expertise to do it right the first time. Along the way, we also add extensive business value to you, our clients, with deep industry knowledge. So let's discuss how we can assist you in achieving business value through application rationalization. As you've all seen, digital transformation and the multi-cloud adoption are driving every organization to rethink their application landscape. That, coupled with worries about possible recession, makes application rationalization that much more important. So the opportunity is really now to have an impact on your organizations. So the things that we're going to cover today are really, what is it? How do you avoid the pitfalls? What does success look like? And how to get started. Phil, you recently wrote a blog called Value Black Hole of Application Rationalization. It's where you describe common mistakes and best practices around application rationalization. For our audience, do you mind taking a minute or two and defining, what do you really mean by application rationalization?
Sure. Yeah. It's simply put, it's an effort to reduce the complexity and the cost of your IT portfolio. That's effectively what result you're looking to achieve. I had some fun with that title. I called it the Value Black Hole because it often becomes all about making it all about the exercise of how you're doing it, what your final report looks like versus what results did I get that actually affected the bottom line. I'll tell you a secret as a former CIO or former CFO, it's really not about the numbers, it's not about your app inventory. It's about being able to answer the simple question, are we as a business getting the value for all of the IT spend we're spending? Because it goes up every year and it's a big percentage of our total budget. So how do we know we're getting value out of all of that IT spend? And most CIOs haven't organized their department or prioritized the processes necessary to be able to answer that question across multiple business lenses. Answer it by P&L, answer it by line of business, answer it by product line output, et cetera. And so that's really what it's about. How do you know and how you get more bang for the buck for the IT that you're investing in?
Yeah, I've seen this from client to client just as a brutal and tough thing to do. But, obviously it sounds like it can be difficult to manage. And, not as straightforward as many might hope of, I take the inventory, I can tell what value this business gets or that business get, right? It kind of reminds me of the times when someone wants to turn off a server and they have to turn it off to see if anybody's still using it, right? Applications can be the same way, but what are some of the common mistakes organizations encounter that you've experienced when trying to tackle this optimization opportunity?
They typically, I see organizations overthink it, overcomplicate it, and get kind of wrapped around the axle there. The example I gave in blog recently was from CIO.gov, and I recommend anyone go there. They have their application portfolio rationalization playbook. It's a very comprehensive document. It makes a ton of logical sense. It has a ton of work that you have to do to go through this process, and when you're done, you're going to have a great inventory and a very well organized application portfolio, but you may not have affected business value at all. And it easily devolves into a highly political conversation that ultimately you end up with a comprehensive document telling you to do exactly what you were doing before. So that's the common mistake. You just don't get the business value out of the exercise, and the CFO is going to be frustrated with it. And I'll give you an example of that. So I worked at a large federal agency, and what this process looks like that I see over and over again is we're going to start with data gathering. What is our inventory? What do we have? What does the whole thing look like? How do I get my arms around my portfolio? And you go find out my CMDB data has not been kept up. I don't have good app inventory. I don't have good asset age on my licenses or my maintenance contracts. And you go through the several months of cleaning up the data, collecting the data to get your arms around your total portfolio, all 1,500 applications or whatever your number is. Once you do that, you get into scoring mode. What are the criteria that I'm going to use to score this from a functionality, from a technical debt, from an asset age, from a security perspective? And then once I've scored them, I'll prioritize them across whatever quadrant I'm bucketing it into. So this is an invest. This is eliminate and sunset. This is keep it as it is. And then you start to map those prioritized scores into those buckets, and then you start to share those buckets with the application owners and the lines of business, and they start to tell you why you're wrong, and they start to tell you how important their system is. No HR VP wants to see their HR system is in the keep it as is state. They want you to tell them. They want you to fight for more money for them so they can have the latest and greatest. Everyone's going to want the latest and greatest. And so you end up with a document ultimately that gets negotiated across the entire company that keeps everything at the status quo. That's what I've seen a bunch of times.
Yeah, that is a great example, and I think you can see it over and over again, especially when you get into some of the politics and those kind of things. But I think the core thing there is really don't overthink it, right? Don't try to do too much. Don't try to boil the ocean, as they say, or start with a specific area, make some progress, expose that progress to the team and the leadership so that they buy in and they see that agile approach, like as the same approach we take in many cases, right? And focus on where you're get the most for your bang for your buck, or where the biggest spend is going. Progressing to the discussion, I started thinking, when it comes to successful efforts, is it as simple as just doing it differently, or is there more to it, or kind of, what are some of the successful ways to attain this?
There's an interesting correlation between waterfall and agile and these two things. In the CIO.gov example, it's very waterfall. It's very design up front, collect all your data, plan it all out, and then go execute. Whereas successful implementations just focus on the business value, and they do it as simply as possible. And so what application am I spending most, and what applications, what systems am I spending most of my time on? It's a Pareto. You don't need to get a full inventory of everything. Every one of your application managers and your IT leaders, they have a sense of where their team members are spending the most of their time. They can tell you that with a simple question. You don't need a time study to figure that out. If your leaders can't tell you where their team members are spending their time, then you have a bigger problem than application rationalization that you're going to focus on first. But generally, just ask your leaders, hey, where are your team spending the most time? Give me your top 5 applications that cost you the most. How much of their time would you say? You got a 10-person team, 40 hours a week, you got 400 hours? You spend 200 on this application, 100 on this application. How much do you spend on this a week? That's a very easy back of the envelope swag that'll tell you what your cost is. Overlay that with what you have in your license budget for next year. Overlay that ... You start to put a picture together of, hey, these are how much things cost. And once you see how much those things cost, it looks like an agile process. You create user stories from that. You say, hey, legal department, you don't have a records retention program, and we're spending $3 million a year in storage of legal documents, all in tier 1 expensive storage. I'd like to lower the tier of your storage and save $1.5 million a year, but you probably want to put a records retention program in place to guarantee we get that savings. You have that conversation with legal, they're going to be like, oh, that's interesting. What does that mean? It means you'll get the documents in seconds versus milliseconds. Are you okay with that? Right? They're going to be like, yeah, if we can save $1.5 million, we're good with that. That's the user story, right? And then that becomes the thing you're going to go get. That's the low-hanging fruit that it gets the business value. What companies do often, and by mistake, is they'll go to legal and say, you're spending too much in storage. I need you to spend less. I want to lower your storage tier. They don't understand what that means. That creates fear. They push back. They say no. They tell you how important their documents are and how they couldn't possibly change the storage. And you end up with no result. That's that watered down version I was talking about before. So that's the biggest thing companies do, is they focus on, what value am I getting? What is the bang for the buck? Let me use my intuition and my experience to say, let me go focus on these handful of things and go make some measurable difference.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of some work that we've done with that a very large global airline that's based out of Texas, and great company. We've worked with them for many years, even when there were 3 airlines becoming one. We first looked at application rationalization and looking at the 1,900 applications, 1,958 to be specific, applications they had across the organization, and really in that analysis looked at which were being used the most, right? So which had the biggest user function, which being accessed the most. Use those layers, like you said, to really kind of figure out, all right, where is the value, right? And we ultimately came down to a key component of the value, which was basically putting flights in the air, right? And taking the 3 airlines and bringing them down to 1, rationalizing those applications, getting the right ones in, especially that affected those, contracts with the flight attendants or the pilots, right? To make sure that they not only got political buy-in, but got financial buy-in, and help them reorganize that down into one set of applications instead of, flight ops for 3 different airlines, right? Bringing that to one and really enabling each of those groups, which saved them millions of dollars. And now we're in the process of helping them really move to that, cloud and multi-cloud environment. So I've seen the story that you just described, and it's amazing how well it impacts a company, especially whether that be through a merger acquisition, which we've done before, or divestiture, which we've done before, or just looking at, a company itself, right? Let's continue the discussion. What would you say to someone who thinks they don't need to go through this exercise, or someone who doesn't think they need any help?
Sure. I would say good luck, and hopefully your replacement has better success, because it's going to take you too long to answer that question. And are we getting value for the IT spend that we've got? If going back to my waterfall agile analogy, how many companies have successfully shifted from, entrenched waterfall practices to agile without an agile coach, without doing training internally, without bringing a third party in to help shepherd their way and guide them through that process. And this is very similar to that. The general steps are pretty well outlined, but they're not necessarily common sense. They should be, but they're not. They're not traditionally what IT does. And so, you need someone to help you formulate those questions, to give credence to the conversation that you're going to have with the business around, this is what this thing costs, and this is the options we have to do it differently. Setting up those meetings, coordinating those activities, tracking and stacking and documenting all your efforts and your information, and then being able to celebrate it. Because a lot of this comes down to, you're really answering the question, is IT valuable for us? And the answer to that is yes. And IT departments know their value, but they don't often communicate the value. So some of this is a little bit of internal marketing. It's to say, look, this is what we do for you. This is why our budget is what it is. This is the value you're getting out of it. And this is what your people are saying is valuable to them of what we do for them. And knowing those things, you start to put forward the view. A lot of CIOs talk about wanting to have a seat at the table. But if they're at the table and the CFO or the COO are talking about reducing a line of business, eliminating something that they do, investing more in an area, it'd be amazing to know, hey, if we got rid of this department, what would that save us in our IT costs? Most CIOs can't answer that question in that meeting at that time. It becomes a big effort to go figure it out. If you can answer that question in that time, they want you at that table helping strategize. Even better, if you're bringing them that information and showing them what their IT spend landscape looks like in their language, it starts to raise questions. It starts to get them thinking about what to do differently. You know, this is application portfolio rationalization, but often companies need business process rationalization. But if you don't know why you need to do that or what it costs you not to do it, you know, it's hard to start off on those efforts.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, this from what I've seen, this could save them, somewhere in the neighborhood of, 15 or 20%. Not only that, but as I look at that last example I gave with that global airline, we did something in, a 18-month period that it would have taken them 3 to 4 years to do, which if you think about all of the technical debt surrounding the cost of all those applications and all the hardware and everything that went behind it, and the synergies of getting everybody on the same platform, there's huge opportunities and savings. And obviously that airline I'm talking about actually went outside and got help from us to do it. But is this something, most organizations are going to do on their own?
Well, certainly they can. I mean, let me ask you, Chris, have you ever looked at your credit card bill and realized you've got some recurring transactions of subscriptions you forgot to cancel or don't use anymore?
Oh, you mean Netflix? No, I never looked at that. Sorry.
I guarantee your IT portfolio has that. And it's probably, at least 2 or 3 or 5 or 10% of your total budget is going to those things that you didn't realize you were still paying for. Obviously, somebody knows they're paying for it, but organizationally at the decision-making level, it may not be obvious. And so, yeah, can organizations do it themselves? Certainly they can. The challenge is, how often do you have time to do that work and that research? Your team is sized to do the job that you have them doing right now. It's not sized to take on this extra effort. And my recommendation would be bringing an expert that's done it before, that has a team of folks that know how to do it efficiently, that has the tools, that has the templates, that has the accelerators, that know the taxonomy. The right thing to do is to follow the money to answer the business value question. But it's not, it's often difficult for first timers to efficiently allocate all of their IT spend. IT folks like to overthink things, and we want to get it just right and perfect. And we want every cent in the general ledger to be allocated to the right bucket of IT costs. And if you don't have a good taxonomy, I highly recommend the Technology Business Management, TBM, taxonomy. If you don't have good automation tools like Aptio, you can certainly do this all in Excel and do it by hand, but it's unlikely you have the resources and the manpower you can devote to that to do it right without augmenting your staff in some way.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Anyway, Aptio is a great example of a great tool to use for this process too, and we've used it so many times before. Hey, when an organization's ready to make these improvements and they want help, what do? Just 1-800-PHIL?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just hit me up on Snapchat. No, I have a friend. I brought that up because I have a friend that's an IT director, and he gets a lot of his trouble tickets on Snapchat, which is not his preferred route for IT trouble tickets. But I found it super amusing. But yeah, reach out to us at Paradigm. Our information's on the website. You can check me out on my LinkedIn page and other resources there. I'll be happy to do a consultation with you. Happy to talk to you about what are you trying to achieve? What does your landscape look like? Do a workshop. We can do an assessment. We have a lot of very simple, very quick, easy, fast ways to kind of give you a game plan for what you need to do to answer that question. Are we getting value out of IT for the amount of money we're spending? I almost guarantee the answer is yes. I almost guarantee you can get more value out of it. You can optimize it. And I also guarantee you your performance review as a CIO will look a lot better when you're speaking business language, and the executive team feels great about the value they're getting from their IT organization.
Great insights, Phil. And Phil, thanks for all your insights here today. We've covered a lot of different points, right? Everything from, what it is to how do you, what are the pitfalls? What are the success factors? And how do you reach out, and what is the value of bringing someone else in to help you do that? As I look at the questions, one of the questions is where have you done this before? As I identified before, that global airline's a great example. Also, the super regional mid-sized bank, or super regional bank, I think it's called, which was recently taken over by another bank. But that case is where we went in and we actually did a complete analysis of all of their applications and the technical debt that was associated with them. And then also I did a value-based matrix to identify what the value is, what the access is, all the different layers Phil identified. And then identified for them where they should make a change, where they should move to the cloud for some, where they should upgrade some, and ultimately saving them, I think it was about $13 million, which is not too bad, right? Especially on an annual basis. So that's a great example of where we've done it before. Let me see if there's another question. The other question is a pretty interesting question, and that is, hey, have you done these assessments where either your cost is paid for, or you do a profit sharing or gains sharing in the savings? Yeah, we're open to doing all types of contracts in this type of methodology. There's so much opportunity, and I'd love to say that there's more upside oftentimes where we do those type of engagements, but there often is. So we're more than open to taking a look at a gains sharing opportunity where we share in the benefits of the savings for the work that we do. So yeah, the answer to that one's yes.
Yeah, Chris, I'll add to that and say that with IT projects in general, whether it's this or a capital project, new application, et cetera, it's IT departments for the most part aren't great at, did you get the promised benefit from that project that you were advertising when you got approval for the funding of that project, right? Did it achieve the business benefit that it was intended? And as a former CFO, you call BS on some things of, okay, I've got 1,000 employees that have 5 minutes of gained efficiency. I didn't see anything change on my bottom line. And so it's, how do you tie that back to real quantifiable, real businesses where you can change people's budgets and affect staffing and decision-making going forward? That's what you want to tie it back to. And it's always been hard for IT departments and CIOs to do that because they don't typically control the benefit side, right? It's not their staff that's getting more efficient. It's not a tool their team specifically is using for automation. It's somewhere else in the business. And often you lack that partnership in the business to say, hey, business owner, I want you to reduce your department size because I'm going to deliver you IT value that allows you to operate with less people. Very few managers get excited about that. So there is a methodology, there's a way to put that in place. And it starts with this process. If you're having that conversation, okay, here are the 10 things we spend the most money on. Okay, let me go talk to the 10 owners of these 10 things. Let me find out what value they're getting from it. That's going to spark ideas. Once those ideas are sparked, IT plans those and says, okay, this is what it's going to take to replace this or upgrade this or enhance this or reduce this. They plan that out. They meet back up again and say, okay, here's what we think we can do. Business gets excited because business starts to be able to say, hey, I partner with IT and we're going to save $2 million a year. That is something they can get excited about, right? And without that partnership, it's really about the business getting a business benefit and IT being positioned to enable that. It's not about IT forcing something on the business. And so, yeah, the profit sharing or the profit savings concept is great as long as you have a good process for actually getting that savings and not, using that money somewhere else without exposing that decision. And that's something that we can help you with too. And that we can help you with that across your whole IT project portfolio of, are you getting business value for this effort you're spending?
No, really good points. Thanks, Phil. Hey, and how to get started, gang? Thank you very much for your time again. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Please share this with other folks on your social media pages or with other folks that you think may need some help in rationalizing their applications or rationalizing what they're really doing from a technology standpoint. We do have application assessment workshops where we help from a workshop standpoint come in and just work through, what does this look like? What would it look like to deploy such a program at your own organization? We also have a rationalization process review. Hey, let's look at the process that you have currently that you have in place to help you further add best practices to it. So thank you, everybody. Phil, thanks for your insights and your thought leading knowledge here. You're obviously an expert in this field and have really shown many times over the years. So thanks again for your time. Nicola, thanks for putting this together. And again, thanks everybody for joining. Make it a great day. And we at Paradigm truly appreciate you.